A sudden storm has swept across the economic landscape, catching businesses, workers, and policymakers off guard. The air is thick with uncertainty as the first signs of trouble ripple through the financial world. At the center of this turmoil is a staggering $22 billion, a figure that represents not just lost revenue, but a shockwave reverberating through every sector of the economy. This number is more than a statistic. It symbolizes a profound shift in the US-Canada relationship, a partnership that has been a cornerstone of North American trade and prosperity for generations. Now, new American tariffs threaten this stability, forcing Canada to confront its largest trading partner as its most formidable economic challenge. The sense of security that once defined cross-border commerce is rapidly eroding. The $22 billion figure highlights not only Canada's financial strain, but also the vulnerability of its industries, from banking to manufacturing, as they brace for the fallout. In response, Ontario has announced a massive stimulus pledge, aiming to shield its economy and workers from the worst effects of the crisis. Yet, questions remain about whether this will be enough. Integrated supply chains mean that tariffs don't just affect numbers on a balance sheet, they disrupt factories, threaten jobs, and ripple through entire communities. Political decisions are now felt as direct threats to everyday livelihoods. Across Canada, people feel increasingly precarious, their futures tied to the unpredictable tides of the American market. The government scrambles to respond, all while navigating deep domestic political divisions. The crisis has exposed rifts between federal and provincial governments, each proposing different strategies and sometimes clashing over the best path forward. As leaders debate the details of rescue packages and economic relief, ordinary citizens are left to wonder what the future holds for their jobs, their families, and their communities. The storm has arrived and its path remains dangerously unpredictable. No one can say for certain how long the turmoil will last, or what the ultimate cost will be. The economic pain isn't isolated. It spreads from boardrooms to kitchen tables, creating a shared sense of anxiety and vulnerability that unites Canadians in uncertainty. To grasp this conflict, we must understand the primary weapon, the tariff. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, making them more expensive for consumers. While straightforward, tariffs have complex effects, triggering chain reactions. In the US-Canada context, tariffs are especially disruptive, affecting deeply intertwined economies. Consider the car industry parts cross borders multiple times and tariffs increase vehicle costs. Using tariffs against a close ally like Canada is significant, akin to erecting a wall through a factory floor. Long-standing agreements like NAFTA were designed to eliminate such barriers. Reintroducing them signals a fundamental shift, turning partners into competitors. The economic showdown was sparked by a US decision to impose significant tariffs on Canadian goods. A 25% tariff made Canadian products expensive in the American market. This broad economic assault targeted core Canadian industries, sending shockwaves through the economy. The decision followed escalating trade tensions, with Washington arguing past deals were unfair. For Canada, this argument was hard to swallow, viewing itself as a reliable trading partner. The timing was challenging, with Canada already facing economic issues like a ballooning deficit. The proposed tariffs targeted key sectors like automotive and softwood lumber, vital to Canadian exports. This broad approach ensured economic pain across the country, from Ontario to British Columbia. The spark had been lit, and the fire was beginning to spread. Faced with an unprecedented threat, Canada's response has been multifaceted, spending promises and political maneuvering. The federal deficit soared by nearly $22 billion, limiting financial firepower. Ontario's premier pledged a $22 billion stimulus to shield the economy. Quebec requested federal infrastructure funding, adding pressure on Ottawa. Provinces signaled they couldn't weather the storm alone, needing a national response. The government prepared for a more confrontational relationship, investing in border security. This spending came at the expense of other promises, showing a dramatic reordering of priorities. The nation shifted from peacetime to a defensive crouch, preparing for a costly economic battle. The newly imposed American tariffs pose a direct and immediate threat to a wide range of Canadian industries that are deeply reliant on access to the US market. For decades, the economic relationship between the two countries has been built on open borders and integrated supply chains, but these tariffs now put that stability at risk. The automotive sector, often considered the crown jewel of Ontario's economy, is facing a potentially catastrophic 25% tariff on vehicles and parts. This is not just a number, it represents a direct hit to the heart of Canadian manufacturing, threatening the viability of plants and the livelihoods of thousands of workers. Cities like Windsor and Oshawa, whose identities and economies are closely tied to the auto industry, now face an uncertain future. Jobs, local businesses, and entire communities are at risk, as their ability to sell products south of the border is suddenly in jeopardy. Canada's softwood lumber sector, long a source of trade friction with the US, is also facing a significant escalation in tensions. The new tariffs threaten to deepen an already complex dispute, putting even more pressure on an industry that supports thousands of rural jobs. These tariffs make Canadian lumber much more expensive for American builders, which in turn drives up housing costs for families across the United States. The ripple effects are felt on both sides of the border, from sawmills to construction sites. For Canada, and especially for provinces like British Columbia and Quebec, where forestry is a cornerstone of the local economy, the impact could be devastating. Communities that depend on timber exports may face layoffs, mill closures, and economic decline. The pain doesn't stop there. The tariffs extend to steel, aluminum, and agriculture, industries that are foundational to Canada's manufacturing and export strength. Farmers, mill workers, and factory employees all stand to lose as costs rise and markets shrink. Ironically, these tariffs also increase costs for U.S. manufacturers who rely on Canadian materials and parts, making it harder for them to compete globally. The interconnectedness of the two economies means that pain on one side quickly spreads to the other. This broad attack on Canadian industry is perilous, threatening the core pillars of the nation's export economy. The consequences could reshape trade patterns and economic fortunes for years to come. Ultimately, these tariffs act as a tax on prosperity, leaving entire regions under siege and forcing communities to fight for their very survival in an increasingly uncertain world. The economic crisis has spilled into politics, creating divisions and forcing leaders to stake positions. Prime Minister Mark Carney must project strength abroad while managing a fractious landscape at home. The soaring deficit provides ammunition for opponents, accusing the government of fiscal mismanagement. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blames policies for fueling inflation, positioning as fiscally responsible. NDP leader Marit Stiles criticizes inadequate worker protection, promising aggressive job-saving measures. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford pledged a stimulus, challenging the federal government to match commitment. Quebec's demand for infrastructure funding signals expectations of substantial federal support. The Snap Ontario election tests different crisis approaches, highlighting a lack of national consensus. As politicians draw lines, the risk of a fragmented response grows, weakening Canada's position. Beyond billion-dollar figures and headlines, this conflict has a real and immediate human cost that ripples through communities across Canada. Tariffs aren't just abstract economic tools, they touch the lives of ordinary people in ways that are deeply personal and often stressful. For many Canadians, tariffs are a source of daily anxiety about their financial security and the future of their families. The uncertainty they create can keep people up at night, worrying about how to pay the next bill, or whether their jobs will still be there tomorrow. Job loss is often the most immediate and visible fear, threatening the livelihoods of those whose work is tied to local factories, sawmills, and other industries that depend on cross-border trade. When tariffs hit, entire communities can feel the shockwaves. But the impact doesn't stop at the factory gates. Trade wars and tariffs can drive up the cost of everyday essentials, from groceries to household goods, making it harder for families to stretch their budgets. Retaliatory tariffs or a weaker Canadian dollar can make imported goods, like electronics, cars, and even fresh produce, more expensive, forcing consumers to make tough choices or go without. Economic uncertainty also chills broader investment, slowing down sectors not directly targeted by tariffs. Construction projects may be delayed, small businesses might hold off on hiring, and entrepreneurs could rethink expansion plans. This climate of fear and hesitation affects financial decisions at every level, from families putting off buying a new car, to business owners postponing upgrades or expansions, all because the future feels so unpredictable. The ongoing conflict threatens not just economic stability, but also the sense of prosperity and security that Canadians have long shared with their American neighbors. It challenges the idea of a predictable shared future. As the dispute drags on, Canadians are left wondering whether their leaders will find a way to de-escalate tensions, or if they're entering a new, more hostile era of trade relations, one with lasting consequences. For millions of Canadians, the outcome isn't just a matter of policy, it's a question that will shape their daily lives, their jobs, and their hopes for the future for years to come.